Medical students are here. I have a renewed faith in our future just by meeting a few of them, future doctors here. So I didn't want to sound like a Debbie Downer that's earlier when I was talking. There's a lot of resources coming out now. One regarding what's going on with the vaccine is Truth for Health, because it covers a lot of issues, not only just the vaccine, but a lot of what's going on in the healthcare, especially the effects of vaccine, which is affecting all of us. So truthforhealth.org is one. Bobby Scheidler, who we're working with together on the euthanasia aspect, he has a website called Terry Schiavo. I think it's terryschiavo.com or .org, and he has information on that and euthanasia. The Eric Scheidenberg, who is the expert in Canada, has his own website. If anybody needs that information, I can get it for you, because right now it's not, I don't think it's on my, maybe I could find it. He has a very good, if anybody's interested, I can send it to you. How's that sound? What plans, what places for information and students go to these so I would just recommend the students to go to those sites, the medical students to go to those sites, the Truth for Health, and even get involved. We'd love to, if you're interested in being a part of our group for the Truth for Health with Dr. Lee Valite. She covers a lot of, it's wonderful. They discuss a lot of issues regarding all that's going on with vaccination and future issues as well. So, and you can always touch base with me, and I with my email, which is for the med students, MMPOSC3, 3 in honor of the Trinity, MMPOSC3@gmail.com.
I can give them that information also.
Yeah.
I think the remaining questions are more for
the
yes,
scholars.
Yes. Do you have any parting words for us?
I just want to thank everyone for coming, and I'm sorry I have to go to the district of DC, which is the district of craziness. I do want to ask you to also keep in your prayers, since I've got the mic. We've been firsthand supporting a group of the 8 people who have been arrested, handcuffed. Joan Bell is one of them. She's a mother of 7, adopted 6 with severe handicaps. We had Chris and Joan stay with us, Jean Marshall next door, who's from Boston, like Mark Houck. She was also arrested by the FBI. I didn't know that. Her sister Paulette is coming next Thursday with her husband. Paulette's on oxygen, but she's going to undergo trial and most likely be thrown in jail for going against the FACE Act, which is an act that I forget the acronym now, but it's basically going into an abortion center and blocking the entrance. But that gives them a year, but then they've got an extra 10 years if they are considered a conspiracy, which the judge, it was very lopsided. So as Dr. Owens was saying, the world's upside down. This judicial system is upside down because we have Dr. Shin, I don't want to say the name, doctor, but he's San Angelo, who's doing 3rd trimester abortions, even with babies aborted, still alive, and allowing them to die. And yet 8 of our pro-life heroes are now in prison, and they could go for 11 years. And Joan Bell is 75.
A lot to pray for.
It's a lot to pray for. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sister. Yeah. Safe journeys. Safe journeys, sister. We'll certainly be praying for Sister Deirdre Byrne and her community, the little workers of the Sacred Hearts in Washington, D.C., and their great work. The question, Pamela, I have a couple questions for you. Is there still research being done on umbilical tip tissue umbilical cord tissue. Is this tissue considered better as it avoids the ethical issues?
So I'm aware of some research being done to try to develop a cord blood cell line through the John Paul II Institute. I believe Dr. Alan Moy is the head of that currently. They were talking about this at Bringing America Back to Life, which was a pro-life conference that I've attended for the past several years. It happens up in Cleveland every year in March. And he was speaking about it about 3 years ago, and I don't know that they've actually come out with the cell line yet, although they thought they were close at the time, so they might be running against some production problems. But even if they did develop an umbilical cord cell line, you would run into the problem that I kind of alluded to earlier, where you have this whole industry sort of built around growing and modifying HEK293 cells. So then now you have to go and you create new media and you create new reagents and nobody's interested in doing that, because there's no money in that. And as long as they're making money off the current aborted fetal pharmaceuticals, that's never going to change. So it's the sad part of that. So just keep going to the next one.
These questions
These are
umbilical
related.
cord related also.
Yeah, stem cells and cell lines are different, so some of the questions are reflecting a little bit of confusion about that. There are adult cell lines that are made, and I was actually telling someone who came up to talk to me, there's one that's actually very well suited to growing in the lab. It's called Gila cells. It was named for the woman it was taken from. Her name is Henrietta Lacks. But she was African American, and the cells were taken without her consent. So that's unethical. But the aborted baby tissue is not, according to modern scientific ethics. Yeah, it's kind of backwards. That raised a huge problem for the scientific community, because when Henrietta Lacks' family found out, they sued the people that developed the cell line. So that one doesn't get used as much anymore. There are other ones, but again, I don't know the exact advantages and disadvantages of all the possible cell lines, but yeah, it was absolutely possible to use adult cell lines to develop these vaccines. And in fact, the U.S. has only had one ethics committee to oversee human fetal tissue research, and that was put together in 2019 by President Trump, and it was dissolved in 2021 by President Biden, because a bunch of researchers wrote him a letter and asked him to remove this process, which had a chilling effect on research, because the committee in 2019 looked at 14 different proposals for human fetal tissue research, and they rejected 13 of them because they didn't meet the very basic criteria that the secularists had set up. And the first criteria was that you have to justify why you can't do it in any other kind of tissue. Why can't you do it in animal tissue? Why can't you do it in adult tissue? 13 out of 14 of them could not justify why they were using human fetal tissue. So the reason isn't scientific, it's diabolical. And someone asked a question about type 1 diabetes. I don't know what research is being done on type 1 diabetes. I'm a vaccine person, not so much looking at various pathology of diseases. So, but would umbilical cords and placentas be as effective as using aborted fetal tissue? There are all kinds of tissues that would be just as effective. We just don't use them. So I have a whole stack here that I got given as well. So I just
Want to work your way through?
want to work my way through these.
You want to take a break and Dr. Paul can answer one?
That'd be great.
Well, I'd like to make a comment about umbilical cord. Hopefully, and I think it does fit in to what Pam Acker's been talking about. That blood in the umbilical cord belongs to the baby. I want to share something with you that you might not know, but the baby inside the uterus begins to have breathing movements about 13 weeks after conception. And by breathing movements is that the chest is moving, and the baby is such that part of the amniotic fluid is made from the baby's lungs. And the algebraic sum for that formation of the fluid is to the fluid to keep coming up, and then it comes out. And the lungs are not an organ of respiration inside the uterus. The organ of respiration inside the uterus is the placenta. And so when a baby comes out, you always hear about the baby starting to breathe. No, the baby started to have those breathing movements 13 weeks after conception. But the circulation to those lungs is much different inside the uterus than it is outside the uterus. So as the baby comes out into air, the fluid comes up and it goes out, but then air replaces it. And as the fluid comes out and the air replaces it, the resistance goes down, and blood flow has to go to the lungs. There has to be an increase in blood flow to go to the lungs. And where does the baby get that blood? It gets it from the umbilical cord. And the umbilical cord at the birth of a baby is distended. It's full of blood. And one of the things that I have great difficulty with is looking at fetal blood or cord blood for studies. That belongs to the baby. They steal from the baby to do that. Now, babies that are born at term, they're big, strong, healthy, they have lots of resistance. And so you can insult them by clamping off their cord quickly, and then they're hypovolemic, and they have more difficulties. Many of neonatal problems that manifest as trouble with breathing are related to early clamping of the umbilical cord. And when you have this desire to get cord blood for study of whatever it is, that's an attack on the baby. And so this particular doctor who knows about those things, and mothers want that done, the way I would participate is, first of all, don't clamp the umbilical cord. The next thing, if the cord is ever clamped it far away from the baby. Let the baby have all of the blood that the baby needs then can get. And then when the baby is fully adjusted from the private intrauterine C, by the way, to this extrauterine environment, then if there's some blood left over, okay, use that, but don't take it away from the baby. And I hope that then I think it fits in. It's another factor. As you, Owen, and Pam Acker and Paul Byrne put together, we're trying to put together the way God has done all of this and how to find a way. Yes, we want to learn more about it, how to take care of ourselves and each other, but we have to do it in accord with God. And the way that God designed human beings so far as birth is concerned, he designed them for the cord not to be clamped. If you don't clamp the cord at all, nothing will happen. All that will happen is the baby will adjust. I mean, I've done it a number of times. The baby will adjust, and after a relatively short time, the placenta passes and does it automatically. You don't have to clamp the cord at all. But why is the cord clamped? It's for convenience. You know, I've had obstetricians come and see me after the birth, and of course what they've done is clamp the cord, made the baby hypovolemic, and then I get the baby to help the baby to breathe when the main problem is the hypovolemia. Incidentally, at one time in our life, my life, we were giving blood transfusions to the baby to help respiratory distress syndrome, and it did help.
Would you address that?
Well, I just want to add one tiny thing. I greatly appreciate that because I had no idea. Not being an urologist, it's bigger than a cell. I don't do it, but it's really interesting then that this cord blood cell line that's being worked on by Catholics does not really seem to be going anywhere, because obviously this is not God's plan for how this is supposed to go either. So that's the only thing I wanted to add.
The question here is, why aren't we using pig hearts, organs, instead of harvesting from people? Well, the use of pigs and other animals, but especially pigs, has been going on for a long time. I mean, even back when I was in medical school, and that was a century and a half ago, it was going on then, and then over time they keep doing it. But why has this research gone in the direction that it is? One of the things that's so sad to me is the treatment of people with difficulties with their brain. If they hadn't done this thing with organ transplants and the goal to get the organs, they would have found better ways to treat people with brain injury and that kind of thing. And so they go in the wrong direction. And in some ways, it's kind of what's easier, I suppose. I guess it's easier to get an organ from someone than it is to do research on pigs. Okay, now that leads me to another thought. You see, the way God created us is so that our organs cannot be transplanted to someone else. And the transplantation industry did not develop until they had anti-rejection drugs that they could use. And everybody who gets an organ transplant, essentially everybody has to be on anti-rejection drugs for the rest of their life, because God made it so you can't do this. Now, is it that God didn't know how to do these things? God knows how to set up anti-rejection. He does it. He does it every time a mother is pregnant. So as soon as the mother is pregnant, her immune system is changed so she won't reject her baby. And some of this information has come out from organ transplants, because in trying to find different ways to develop anti-rejection drugs, they looked at the mother, and there's an early pregnancy factor that happens as soon as the mother is pregnant, even before implantation, but it happens right away so that her body's not rejecting her baby. And so God knows how to interfere with the rejection process, yet at our stage and after we're out of the uterus, we always reject each other's organs. So we need to follow and pay attention to God.
By the way, there's been a stem cell cord blood bank since 1971 in New England. And that's been very effective and very easy.
Questions that have been written
Kind
down
of
on cards.
expensive.
I'm sorry, everyone else wrote in a card to receive a question. I'm not trying to be rude. You're an elderly fan, I respect you very
But
much.
she said she didn't know anything about.
But it doesn't matter. Everyone who had a question wrote on the card. Sometimes we have people at conferences that get aggressive with the presenters. It's very
I'm
stressful.
not being aggressive.
Very gentle. But all the questions were written on cards that we answered that way. If we do follow-ups, maybe they'll call me. And I apologize. Thank you for understanding.
Okay, we can talk to each
Do you have a question?
So the question I have is, I am a 5th grade teacher in a Catholic school. Using public school textbooks, I'm very careful to teach science in a way that directs my students to know and see God and His revelation of creation as the truth of the way things came into being. However, I'm not a science person, and I would like to know where I can find good Catholic resources to teach science at grade level. Does Ms. Acker or Mr. Owen have any suggestions or recommendations? So we'll give Ms. Acker a rest, but if she wants to chime in, of course she can do so. This is a tall order. It's very expensive and takes a lot of time and labor to produce textbooks at different levels in different areas of natural science. But Ms. Acker was the principal author of a biology textbook, which can be used by high school students or even university students. And I think it's the most wonderful science textbook by far that I've ever read in my life. And we have that available on our website, as well as a laboratory manual and exercises and answer key that go with that. But for younger students, we have this DVD series, Foundations Restored, with a really excellent teacher's guide, and well, there are quite a few parishes where even the priests have shown the DVD series to their parishioners who are interested. But we also have some schools, homeschool co-ops, and many homeschooling families all over the world that are using the DVD series. And even children as young as 10 or 11 or 12 years old, they really benefit greatly from the DVD series. Towards the end, there's some material in the last few episodes that parents need to look at, and you have to make the decision whether you would want your children to see it, because it's looking at the consequences of the acceptance of this false account of origins on society, and some of it is only appropriate for older children. But I highly recommend the DVD series, even for children as young as 10, 11, 12 years old. They would benefit greatly from it. Some of it would be too difficult, but a lot of it they would be able to understand. And it's Foundations Restored, and we have a separate website, foundationsrestored.com, where you can watch the first 2 episodes for free, so you can get a good idea of how it's done. But as I said, the teacher's guide for that is really excellent, and it helps the parent or the teacher who uses the DVD series to use it effectively. Now, for 5th grade level, there are some other things that I would recommend. Eric Birmingham's a member of our leadership team. He's an aerospace engineer, and he's written a number of excellent books. One of them, which has the imprimatur, is Creation versus Evolution. We have it on our website. It's very clear, it's very well written, and it's only about 100 pages. And 5th graders would be able to understand most of what is in that book, and it really does give an excellent overview of the controversy over origins. And then he wrote another book, The World from Beginning to End and the Era of Peace. There are a couple of things in there that, as a parent, you might want to not have a 5th grader read, but only the parents can make that discernment for children, and not all children are the same or need to be taught the same things at the same age. But I recommend those 2 books because he's got a gift for explaining things very clearly and logically, and you would be able, I think, to use those materials very successfully with students in that age bracket. Beyond that, I would just encourage you to go also to our website. There's one other resource. We have, towards the bottom of the homepage, we have a number of short videos. I don't think any of them is longer than 15 minutes. Most of them are just 10 minutes or less. And there's a certain order that we recommend that you show them in, which if you email me, I'd be glad to tell you. But we found that young people, even like 10, 11, 12 years old, really get a lot from those videos. And you could see all 5 of the ones that I most recommend in less than an hour. So that's another fantastic resource that you can take advantage of on the Kolbe website. I hope that helps.
And the Kolbe website is an excellent way to continue this conversation, to continue your research, to continue your learning. Every question's been asked. So if you're a skeptic, take your concern to the Kolbe Center. There's a whole library of articles, videos, all kinds of responses and rebuttals to rebuttals, It's just to the point where there's no doubt. So just, it's like trying to disprove the catechism. It can't be done. Pamela, are you ready? Fifth grade resource.
See, it's funny, you and Mr. Owen couldn't see what all the rest of the audience could, which is like I jumped with excitement when you asked that question. So I'm actually currently, I spoke with Mr. Owen about this, I think over a year ago, but I'm currently working on putting together a list of resources that are, we could call them loosely Kolbe Center approved, because I taught, so I was homeschooled myself, and then I taught science, everything from middle school all the way up to college, and including in a homeschool co-op. So I've done it all. I've taught in Catholic schools, taught in colleges, taught in homeschools, and I've used a lot of different resources. And so there's actually a whole list of things that I could give you that would be helpful for 5th grade level. But I don't want to spend all of our question and answer time going through all of them. So if you would, whoever the 5th grade teacher is, if you could come up and talk to me afterwards, I will give you my email address, and you can email me directly about that. And anybody else who is also interested who didn't make themselves known as a 5th grade teacher can send in an email to the kolbecenter.org website. And I'm hopeful, I'm giving some presentations out in Colorado in a few weeks to some homeschooling families, and based on those and based on the feedback I get from those, we should have something posted on our website, God willing, before the end of the year that has a list of, an understanding of philosophy of teaching science, particularly to homeschool children, because a lot of parents get really daunted by that. So our philosophy of teaching science K through 12, and then suggested resources for that. So, but pray for that, because anytime I try to do anything, I get really sick. So, thank you.
Got a couple more questions.
Oh, sure. Here. Yes, I'm gonna start actually with one of the questions I got handed right after my talk. So this one says, as a child, I had the vaccines in the 1950s, MMR, polio, Tdap. I then, it's probably DPT actually, but I then went on in my teens to have rubella. My sister got the measles, a friend got the mumps. All of us were vaccinated. Did the vaccines give us the diseases, or did the vaccines not work? Because that brings up two important points. One is that actually live viral vaccines can give you disease. So you can develop atypical chickenpox or atypical measles after receiving those live viral vaccines. And also that there is both primary and secondary vaccine failure. So primary vaccine failure occurs in some individuals for reasons that we don't quite understand yet. They simply never mount an immune response no matter how many times you vaccinate them. And of course, it's really bad to keep vaccinating someone who's not mounting an immune response, because you're just triggering their haywire immune system to be more haywire. So there's a certain percentage of the population that will simply never, ever have a vaccine-induced immunity, no matter how many times you stick them. And then most vaccines have a period of time after which they wear out. So as one example, the hepatitis B vaccine, which we give to infants on the first day of birth, which is actually protective against a disease that they will only contract if they are sharing needles or having promiscuous interactions. So it's silly to vaccinate an infant for that. But the antibodies that they will have against hepatitis B in most individuals will be gone before they're 13. So, probably in this case, this particular case for this particular individual and their siblings, if you didn't develop those diseases at the time that you were vaccinated, then you develop those diseases because of secondary vaccine failure later. And that happens with every single vaccine. Every single vaccine has less time to give you immunity than natural exposure. And natural exposure also has a time limit on it, and it isn't absolutely completely efficacious for the whole of your life. And this is actually a huge problem with the chickenpox vaccine. So when I was little, I got chickenpox, and my mom got boosted because she was exposed to the same pathogen again while she was nursing me and my siblings back to health. And so her immune system saw that pathogen, recognized it, reactivated the memory cells. They got a longer shelf life after that. Right, so what happens now? You have all these adults whose children are not getting chickenpox, so they're not getting naturally boosted. So what happens? They develop shingles earlier and earlier and earlier. So that's just, I could go on and on, but I need to let somebody else answer your question.
This question is directed to you, Dr. Byrne. With conventional medicine across the country declaring a person dead and then basically removing hydration and removing food, then the body obviously stops functioning, starves to death, or dies from thirst, or in some other fashion is declared clinically dead. Then they, now I understand this is very common, they cut off the flow of blood to the brain so that they can maintain their declaration. And then they start the heart beating again so that the blood can circulate and keep the organs fresh. So what happens to the soul in that circumstance, our soul, if that's not a stupid question?
Well, basically the question is very similar to what I made when I was giving the talk in terms of patients that have this serious condition, but they continue to have a functioning brain, so they can't call them brain dead, but they still would like to get their organs. And so then what they do is stop the treatment and wait until they're without a pulse. And then without a pulse, they start everything up again. And as they do that, one of the procedures that's being pushed more recently is that they go in and tie off the carotid arteries so that there's no circulation to the brain, so that they can't make them have more brain life, if you want to call it that. They avoid that to make sure that they're called brain dead. All of this stuff is evil. And what happens, and I've gone through this with a couple of other things in my life, trying to figure out how, well, some things okay or not so bad, can't you do it? But if it's evil, you just have to stay away from it, and that kind of thing. So far as brain death is concerned, brain death is not about stopping a ventilator. Brain death is about continuing the ventilator until they line up recipients for the organs and that kind of thing. And so that's what's going on. Once they're declared brain dead, they don't stop treating them right away. They keep their ventilator going until they can give somebody to give the organs to. I hope I answered that question, but before I let somebody else have this microphone, there's a couple other things that are very, very important for you to learn. If you have already said yes to be an organ donor, what should you do? I think you should need to go back to the License Bureau and say that you don't want to be an organ donor. And now you have to know that at the License Bureau, they record when you are going to be an organ donor, but they don't record when you're not going to be an organ donor. The law has also been tested that if you don't document that you don't want to be an organ donor, you don't. It really is not as sound foolproof as you'd like it to be. So the law says you have to have a documentation of refusal, but the law doesn't give you any place to have a documentation of refusal. I've given you a documentation of refusal. Those cards, the little cards that are not like this, but the ones that are stapled in the back of the book, is a document of refusal. And then and it can be signed and witnessed, but also the last 2 pages of the book are exactly like the little card, except it can be notarized. Now, a notarized, again, doesn't make it, doesn't do very much, except it gives a little more clout that somebody has witnessed your signing it. So you need to have that. Now, you need to know another couple of things, but one of the things is that in the world in which we live, that if you get unconscious and can't speak for yourself, you need someone to speak for you. So you have to designate someone to speak for you. So one of the kinds of advanced directive is called a healthcare power of attorney, and you designate someone to speak for you. That someone, though, should be there to protect and preserve your life. what the general thing that goes on with these things is that someone is there to make sure you don't get treatment, that you don't get a ventilator, that you don't get fluids and that kind of thing. That's not the kind of power of attorney you should have, but that's the kind that's available most all the time, every place. Again, in our booklet, we give you a model for a power of attorney that will protect and preserve your life. And you should get that. We're not a lawyer, so you should have your lawyer find a way to make that legal in your state. There's another power of attorney called, I got to stay there one more time. For that power of attorney, you have to know, and I get cases like this, the mother's in Texas, her son is going to school in California, gets involved in an accident, and of course the mother has to get from Texas to California. By the time she gets there, they've already gone to court and gotten a court-appointed guardian who gives permission to give the organs. Once a child reaches the age of majority, which is many places the age of 18, they no longer look to the mother or father as the one who speaks for them. And then the court gets involved, and then our experience has been that they appoint someone, and that usually is another attorney that's part of the system. And so you have to know that your child has to have a power of attorney once they get to be 18, and I suggest that they designate their mother or their father to speak for them if they can't speak for themselves. And I think that the children, as they get older, have to have this in place, and it should stay there till they get married. Then they can designate their spouse. But it's very important that you do that. I have one other thing about advance directives. That's a living will. There's nothing living about living wills, and I could say dying, but I try not to use the word dying because when someone is said to be dying, they're doing that because it seems like they're close to death. So I use that. Anyone who's said to be dying is living. A living will has nothing to do with living. It has to do with you're getting less treatment. And so all living wills contradict two basic principles of medicine. One basic principle is before we make a diagnosis, we gather all the information that we can gather, and then we make the diagnosis, and then our treatment is in accord with hopefully the most up-to-date best medicine that we can use. All living wills violate these basic principles, because if you're going to sign something that's going to take place 5 years from now, you can't possibly have all the information, and you can't possibly have the treatment that's best at that time. So no one should have a living will. Keep in mind, I'm not an attorney.
But you're pretty good.
Hugh, do you have some final thoughts for us before we wrap up?
Yes, yesterday was the anniversary of the miracle of the sun at Fatima, where God worked the greatest public miracle since the resurrection to show that the message of Our Lady of Fatima was urgent and true. And she told us that she's the one who can rescue us from this crisis. So we followed the lead of St. Maximilian Kolbe, who was very good at defending the faith intellectually, but saw that the most important thing was the spiritual battle. So the greatest thing that we can do is to consecrate ourselves to our Lord Jesus Christ through the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but then to live that consecration in every moment. Because she said, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. That is an interior phenomenon. And then all the things that she promised to occur externally will happen, and there will be the social reign of Christ our King throughout the entire world. But first, there have to be enough Catholics who live this consecration in each moment, in every thought, in every word, and in every action. So I think that's the most important thing, because every little thing that we do with our Lord and the Blessed Mother, offering it up to God the Father for the coming of His kingdom, that is bringing down the graces that are necessary to obtain the grace of repentance and conversion for the whole world.
Amen.
Final thoughts?
I had one quick thing I wanted to add that I think is really important, that is notified about via the pharmacist in the audience. But he told me that Novavax intentionally avoided using tainted cells such as HUK293, and it was the FDA who mandated that they use the line in order to compare safety profiles to the other vaccines. And it is also the FDA that refuses to allow us to import the ethical rubella vaccine from Japan. So that's part of what we're fighting here. So I just thought that was important to know. I didn't know that prior to him telling me. So my closing comments will be mostly logistical. The sacramentals are in the building, so if you go back to the back table where Brother Columba is, he can give you one of those. And we're going on several other missions, so please just take one envelope per family. You can take several of the other tartans that are little pieces. They're all blessed, but they're not in envelopes, so that we have enough to give to people as we go to Colorado and Montana. Please pray for us, because as Mr. Owen said when the microphone fell apart in the middle of a particularly important point, the devil hates the stuff that we're talking about, all of us, and consequently also hates us. So all the prayers that you can offer up would be most helpful. So that's all.
Well, we need to praise God and thank God for our blessings, and thank God for our life. And it's a gift, and we need to protect and preserve that life from creation all the way through life until the end. And it's only after life, after death, that then we get involved with doing something that's done, like burial, that kind of thing. But to pretend that you can call somebody dead when their heart is beating in circulation, it's a great big lie. And you, when you have a lie, you have to identify with it, stay away from it, because one lie just leads to many more lies. Thank you very much for paying attention to us. And I tell you, it's a big honor for me to be on a program with Pam Acker and Hugh, Owen. How blessed I am. And the things about her book on biology, I really encourage you to get that. It's excellent.
So, again, this is not about Nebraskans embracing life. It's a blessing and a privilege for us to sponsor a Day of Grace like this. But please be generous in your donations so that we can literally give those to our